Hi, it's Rich Tehrani in the TMC newsroom, and today we're speaking with David Foote, who's the CTO of Hitachi. David, how are you?
I'm doing great.
Fantastic.
Thanks for the invitation.
I'm glad to have you in the newsroom, and what I wanted to discuss with you today is your company's transition into the wireless space. I know that you're well known in fiber and other markets.
Sure.
But how does that experience get you into the wireless space?
Okay. Well, actually, Hitachi actually has a fairly long legacy with wireless infrastructure, primarily in Asia, obviously, being based in Japan. And we've had a pretty long history of doing the previous technologies, legacy technologies of wireless networks, primarily infrastructure equipment, gateways, switching systems, base stations, etc. That includes EVDO, PDSN, UMTS, kind of the evolution of CDMA. And right now, we're heavily in the midst of development of products for YMax and LTE. So because we've had a lot of success in the Asian markets, and we see that those technologies are now being introduced in North America, especially as we move into 3.5G, 4G, what people call 3.9G, we see a window of opportunity for a company that has a lot of history in Asia. Most people understand that the Asian markets typically are a little bit ahead of North America as far as introducing new wireless technology. So we see that's a good window of opportunity for us to bring our expertise to bear in the North American market.
And you play in both the LTE and the YMax space?
Good hint there, good question. So in Asia, interestingly enough, even some of the major operators are going to deploy both. Most of them view it as a timing issue, that they see mobile YMax is deployable now, or basically now, whereas LTE is probably several more years out. But there's definitely consumer demand and business demand for higher broadband services over a wireless network. So the view is there's definitely a demand from the consumer point of view, and it's worth the effort to go ahead and deploy mobile WiMAX now. In North America, we see pretty much most operators are picking one or the other, with most of the major ones picking LTE. At least one major operator would be doing a nationwide mobile WiMAX network, and probably there will be some pockets of regional mobile WiMAX networks in North America.
Do you believe that the size of the networks in LTE and the total coverage area will mean that there will be a larger choice of devices in the LTE world than in the WiMAX world?
I think obviously with a number of major operators around the world, not just in North America, endorsing LTE, it obviously encourages the terminal vendors, handset vendors to invest in R&D for those kinds of devices. I think that's probably the biggest impact, and the expectation is, well, if this is the strategy of the major operators, it's worth that investment from a terminal handset point of view. So I would say that's the major driver that's going to create kind of a wider variety of terminals and handset devices for that technology.
So your company is very strong on the fixed side of the business, and now you're in the wireless side. Is there any sort of integration between those two lines of business?
Okay, so yeah, if we want to talk about kind of the coined word of convergence, those kinds of things. Actually we see that happening coming at two different angles into the network. First, actually, we see convergence starting to happen in the home with things like femtocells. And you really run into some interesting propositions about, well, what's the relationship of a femtocell in the home with the broadband termination device like a DSL modem or cable modem, an ONT for PON, and then the relationship with the broadband home routers that are networking the home together, IP set-top boxes, etc. You get into some interesting dynamics about there's a lot of duplicated functionality across all those devices, and so there's some opportunities for possibly convergence at a physical layer, hardware layer, to reduce cost for the consumer and the network operator, but also to enable new kinds of services that can be launched from that platform, whatever that hardware platform, services platform is that the network provider puts in the house, that can become a platform for services and applications, both wireline and wireless, in the home. So that's kind of the very edge of the network, a convergence view. And then there's a view of convergence back in the core of the network. And that's where you get into things like IMS and converged switching systems, converged routing. Obviously, the view of the network is that wireless is moving to heavily an IP-oriented, flat network architecture as much as possible. And that's aligned somewhat with similar wireline architectures that we've been deploying over the years. So you can see in the core of the network, there's interest in convergence as well. For us as a vendor, obviously, we have experience both in the wireline and wireless arena in both of those areas. And so we're heavily engaged with major operators in discussing about what level of integration makes sense, how much cost you can save, where there's efficiencies, and where it doesn't make sense, where you want optimization in a particular area of technology from a service point of view or an application point of view, and you would decide not to fully converge. So right now we see there's a lot of interactivity with the major operators, with technology vendors like ourselves, on that kind of issue to figure out what is the evolution roadmap for that convergence in the future.
So in terms of the economic environment, you seem to be in some fast-growing spaces. We know wireless data, it seems to not slow down.
Right.
What is the effect of the economic environment?
Okay, so obviously because we're a global player, we see an economic slowdown around the world, not just in North America. Probably a little more severe in North America and other parts of the world. There's pockets in South America that are doing fairly well, et cetera, economically, the macro economies. So we do see that it's impacting all communication-related technologies at some level, okay? The impact varies depending on the technology and how important it is to the long-term strategy of the operators. So as you hinted already, there is a little bit of slowdown in the wireless area, but much less so because most of the operators see that wireless technologies, wireless services and applications are really their best opportunity in the near term to continue to generate more revenue and introduce new types of services. So from a, let's say, CapEx point of view, we see that the wireless CapEx is really not slowing down. It might be flat for a year or so, but it will pick up and ramp back up maybe more quickly generally than the wireline area. But with this convergence issue, it's not so black and white. You know, what's the division between CapEx for wireless and wireline anymore? And that's going to continue to blur.
Interesting. Okay, so you're seeing still, I know BlackBerry had some pretty good earnings just this week, so smartphones are selling. Now granted, some smartphone vendors aren't doing as well as others.
Right.
Sony Ericsson is one of the examples, and there are some others that are having some challenges. But with the proliferation of smartphones, is it not inevitable that networks, wireless networks will be forced to, kicking and screaming, upgrade?
Yes, right, oh yeah. So yeah, and that's why you see the major operators even pre-announcing that their intended strategies of migrating to LTE, even before maybe some of the standards and the technology are mature enough, they realize they've got to have a roadmap for both the consumer market and the business market that shows those services are coming to market. And they're doing it for competitive reasons as well. And then that drives other requirements to upgrade infrastructure into the backhaul, into the aggregation piece of the network, what maybe people call metro.
You're playing in that space
as
well?
And then even in the long haul network, that amount of data traffic that you're going to enable over that wireless.
So that'll be, now we're talking about optical now?
Yeah, you're going to be talking about long haul systems will have to be upgraded because of the bandwidth demand. It will work its way into the network from the edge back to the core.
So really we want smartphones, we want smartphone proliferation as an industry so that we can see the demand for network upgrades.
Well, it will help the from a component vendor, a networking vendor, that point of view, it will help the whole infrastructure continue to generate new business. But obviously, the operators are driven not about buying products from me, but what services can they introduce to generate new revenue. So I think your point is, yeah, it will help the equipment infrastructure vendors, but all the way from the handset all the way to the core of the network. But the main driver is these operators see that they've got to increase the average revenue per user, and the only way to do that is primarily new services with new bandwidth and that kind of thing. So as people buy these smartphones are widely more available, I have these capabilities in the handset. How do I enable that to generate more revenue? So to me, that's really the major driver. And if you look at other markets of the world, like Asia, you can see what the consumers wind up doing with these things when they have fully 3G, 3.5G networks already, and the kinds of services, streaming video, entertainment while they're traveling, et cetera, that they're using. So you can kind of map that into what may happen here in North America and Latin America.
And what's the biggest competitive challenge?
Well, actually, the biggest competitive challenge would be, in some areas, Hitachi is relatively new in the Americas. Like, let's say we talked earlier a little bit like the wireless infrastructure business. So we've got to prove our capabilities and that kind of thing. We have a long history on the optics and long haul and wireline that we can show, but it is it's a different business. So you've got to prove your capabilities. And then the other one is, there's still a lot of competitors out there, very strong players. So it's a tough market to compete in, but we're a major large player. Very financially stable, which is important these days, and so we think there's a number of very strong advantages and differentiation we can bring to the market and to these potential operators and customers.
What's next for the company? Well,
the next, I think, is to continue to grow our business, to look for opportunities for example, we've talked about how wireless infrastructure we see will continue to be upgraded. The broadband stimulus packages and other stimulus packages the federal government has launched will create new opportunities. for various vendors. So I think for the next year or two, we'll be looking for those select opportunities, even though the general macroeconomy is a little bit slow. And then over time, as the industry recovers and the economy recovers, play across the board in all the areas where we think we can compete and bring value to the market.
That's great. Great. We've been speaking today with David Foote, who's the CTO of Hitachi. My name is Rich Tehrani, and I'm in the TMC newsroom. Thanks for watching.